This is Future Cop. I remember this game fondly, more specifically its demo. My brother and I would usually play against each other in its competitive multiplayer, resulting in me losing and breaking too many controllers. That memory was probably from a decade ago, perhaps even longer than that. Back then I was just a kid, but now I'm an adult, and instead of failing at video games, I'm failing at another game called life. Future Cop is a game where police work is all about piloting mecha tanks and slaughtering bad guys by the masses. It was published by Electronic Arts and developed by EA Redwood Shores, but you might know them better as Visceral Games. Yeah, that's right, the guys behind Dead Space. While it did receive praise from both critics and players alike, it wasn't a financial success, only moving about 200,000 copies. Like a previous game I covered, it received ports on both PlayStation 1 and PC. Most games released in this period can be a hassle to get it working on modern computers. Luckily, Play All Games has a great guide to get it working, with an updated installer configured for newer systems. An interesting thing that the website pointed out was that if you wanted to save your progress, you'd have to run the game in administrator mode. Remember when I said that you weren't able to save your progress in Sentinel Returns? This is why. The good news about the PC port is that once you've got everything working, it plays with relatively few issues. But there's a catch. Let's just say that you pause the game to adjust the audio. Seems easy enough, just click sliders until I'm happy with it. Congratulations, you've just soft-locked the game. Every single button no longer works. So yeah, if it wasn't clear enough already, the PC port is kinda busted. And don't get me started on the crashes. Alright then, so how does the game play and how does it hold up in 2019? Let's start with Crime War, the campaign mode. The story is pretty much forgettable, but it's relatively fun with lighthearted and campy moments.
What a sight.
I hope nobody saw that.
Instead, the main focus is the gameplay, usually involving gunning down enemies while piloting a mecha tank called the X1 Alpha. It can switch to hover mode for more speed, but it moves around like it's on ice skates. Future Cop is at its best when you're having mindless fun taking down enemies and obstacles and experimenting with different loadouts. Aiming is never a problem because the auto-targeting does the job just fine. Weapons are separated into 3 categories, light, heavy, and special, and each come in a wide variety, with my favorite loadout being the electric gun, concussion beam, and shockwave generator. I kind of wish there were more tanks to choose from, but hey, I'm satisfied. The first level is good at getting the player comfortable with their abilities, and it's a fun time despite being very simple and straightforward. But then it starts to go downhill. As you'd expect, the later levels become bigger and more difficult. This is a problem because the game lacks a proper checkpoint system, and if you happen to die in a mission, you'll have to start all over again, and it's never a fun time. Shield recharges are scattered across each level to help mitigate the problem, but that's a band-aid, not a solution. While later levels become more complex, it doesn't complement the X1 Alpha's stiff and mechanical movements, which work great in spacious environments, so it's really strange that the game makes you move in tight spaces, mazes, and hallways. It's not very good, and it's clear the tank's controls weren't made for this. Even the camera seems to agree, as it struggles to find a good angle in claustrophobic spaces. Sometimes it got so bad that I got multiple headaches. And then there's the platforming sections, which is just... we don't talk about the platforming, okay? The campaign is a bit of a letdown, and that's because I don't feel as though it plays to the game's strengths. At best, it's okay, and at worst, it's frustrating. So how does Precinct Assault fare? Turns out it's pretty good. I could explain it to you, but I'll let the game do it for me.
This is Precinct Assault. You begin inside your base. You know where the action button is, right? You'll need it. Each base has a hover tank generator. Action button. Hover tanks will seek out the enemy base. When one of your hover tanks enters the enemy base, you win. Sounds simple? I don't think so! You can generate jet choppers.
It's amazing, but yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Precinct Assault is a great mode, combining the best parts of the game with an added layer of strategy. My favorite level of the bunch is Urban Jungle, mostly because it has that one soundtrack from the demo. It's a very simple, open, and symmetrical map, with a basic 3-lane layout which feels great to play in because it complements the tank's movements. Defeating enemies and converting turrets will give points, which you can spend on offensive or defensive units. Additionally, there are more expensive options such as outposts, which act as another base, or powerful units like the Dreadnought and Juggernaut. Both are very beneficial and have an added risk due to the commitment required, but it's up to the player whether they want more territory or more firepower. In single player, you play against Sky Captain, an AI opponent who can be pretty challenging depending on the difficulty. Now, I'm not that much of an expert when it comes to weapon balancing, but it seems to me that the Shockwave is the most overpowered thing, especially when you obtain the upgrade because it basically decimates enemies in seconds. But hey, I ain't complaining, because it's always satisfying when you do this.
Enemy within base perimeter. Your base is under attack. Base turret destroyed. Your base turret destroyed. Base turret destroyed.
You may have noticed that this mode sounds a bit like a MOBA, and you'd be right. Precinct Assault is possibly the first MOBA ever made. In fact, a modder known as Aeon64 based his map in StarCraft from Precinct Assault, which led to Warcraft 3's Defense of the Ancients, and the rest is history. That's pretty cool stuff. Something I didn't mention was that both modes have split-screen multiplayer. The reason why I didn't cover it was because, you know, that requires a friend, and they're in short supply these days. Based on comments by former developers, it seems a lot of love went into Future Cop. So it's a shame that I didn't find the campaign to be very enjoyable, but the multiplayer is a damn good time. Would I recommend it? That's a bit hard to answer, because Future Cop is 20 years old, and with it comes some of the clunkiness these older games have. As someone who has a great amount of nostalgia for this era, I don't really mind as much. But if you're someone who has gotten used to how streamlined games have become these days, playing this might just be the gaming equivalent of Whiplash. Otherwise, if everything I described sounds like a fun time, then give it a shot. Getting it on PC is going to be a bit of a challenge. It never got a re-release on any platform, and Sony only sells it for PlayStation. You can obtain it through other methods, so there's that. It's a game that deserves a remaster, and as it so happens, I stumbled upon someone who was remaking it in Unreal Engine, so that's pretty neat. I think that just about covers it. Join me next time as we fly carpets and raise an undead army while we're at it. Until then, I'll see you next time.